Hello, it's Drisk here and welcome to my best game of a letter arcade edition, with this video being the letter C. Yes, I thought in this world where we're all swamped with choice, it'd be fun if I ask myself the simple question, what if I could only choose 5 games per letter per system and nothing else? What would I choose? I've then ranked those games in order of preference. Now remember, this isn't what game is the most important to video game history or what game is most liked by most people, but simply the games which are most fun for me personally to play. My hope is that this list and video highlights or reminds some amazing games to encourage you to play the next time you're looking at one of those long, fully loaded gaming lists. Okay, as I mentioned, this video is for the letter C on the arcade platform, and my word, there were so many amazing games to choose from. But nevertheless, I have chosen, and here is my top 5. Okay, for number 5, I've gone for the 1999 Sega driving classic, Crazy Taxi. Now the concept of this game is amazing, with you having to play a range of madcap taxi drivers who must drive around a San Francisco-like city, driving anywhere to pick up and drop off anyone daft enough to get in your cab. Now, full disclosure, this actual recording is of the Dreamcast version and not the original Naomi arcade board. But to be honest, it's essentially the same hardware, so you'd be hard pressed to notice any differences between this and the arcade version. Now, this game is a huge amount of fun, with it all about learning the city routes and all the shortcuts you can take. It's so much fun riding down the wrong way of a one-way street, going across a park with all the hapless pedestrians jumping out of the way as you sharp turn into the final destination. Now, depending on how fast you drop the passengers off and how little you crash, it will depend on how big the tip that they pay you on top of your fare, and this is essentially your score. Too slow and they will dive out of the moving car looking for a quicker ride elsewhere. Now, all of this mania is set to the brilliant Offspring tunes, which perfectly complements all the madcap frantic on-screen action. Also, the licenses strewn throughout the game, such as KFC, Pizza Hut and Tower Records, really add to the proceedings as well, making you feel in that real world. It is this soundtrack and licenses which is sadly missing from many of the later re-releases of the game, and it makes a surprising loss and a huge difference to the overall experience, in my opinion. Now, the game is made by Sega Hitmaker Division, and this is a game that I never tire of, being absolutely perfect for quick, short bursts of gameplay. Now, to play this game today, unless you're lucky enough, of course, to see the arcade game out in the wild or at Arcade Club, or I suppose you have a Naomi emulator fully working. But thankfully, if you can't do any of that, there's some fantastic home ports, such as on the Dreamcast, PS2 or GameCube. Now, of those 3, I personally suggest the GameCube version is the best one to try, as this is the most powerful hardware and they really do put it to good use here. Okay, let's go on to number 4, and I've gone for the 1984 Konami gem called Circus Charlie. Now, I know this game is simple, but I adore this game, as you play Charlie the Clown, who must do a range of death-defying acts for score and the thrill of the onlooking circus crowd. Now, gameplay-wise, it is simplicity itself, with the first level having you ride on the back of a lion as you do perfectly timed jumps through hoops of fire. This is all set to an insanely catchy tune that perfectly complements the action. Now, for those going for score, there's so many hidden tricks in the game. Jump backwards and forwards through the hoops at the start and you get an extra life. Later on, jump backwards through hoops over pots for extra points as well. For me, this is gaming perfection, and whenever I boot it up, I can't stop myself from playing. It's just so addictive. Now, along with the first level, there's a nice range of other circus challenges you must do as well. Level 2 has a hapless clown balancing on a tightrope, jumping over monkeys. Level 3 has you bounce on trampolines, going from one to the other, avoiding the fire-breathing axe and knife throwers as you bounce to the end of the level. Level 4 has you on giant rolling beach balls, rolling them along and backwards and forwards to make the perfect jump onto the next ball. Then there's level 5 that has you ride on the back of a pony, using bouncing spring platforms to get you back onto the pony again as it goes hell for leather. This is such a fun level to tackle. Finally, in level 6, you're on a trapeze, swinging with timed jumps from one trapeze swing to another. Now, as you probably can tell by the enthusiasm in my voice here, I do adore this game, and whilst it's overly simplistic when compared to some of the others, I just never seem to tire of this old classic, and one that I heartily recommend. Now these days it can be found on the PS4 and Xbox One as digital downloads, and there's also an incredibly good port on the original Nintendo NES machine, so there's no excuse not to give this game a go today. Now let's go on to number 3. Okay, I've gone for the Atari 1983 classic Crystal Castles. Now this is not only one of the prettiest arcade cabinets around, in my opinion, but the game itself is extremely pretty as well, blowing my mind that this did in fact come out in 1983. Now it has you play Bentley Bear, who must negotiate an isometric view maze using a trackball to quickly scoot around the maze, collecting up all the gems like you do in Pac-Man. But unlike Pac-Man though, there are additions here that you can do, such as you can press the jump button to jump over enemies. You can go through tunnels and use lifts to make your way to higher platforms. Also, some of the enemies will collect the gems as well, meaning you'll lose potential score and bonus if you fail to quickly pick up all the gems. Equally, if you fail to pick up the last gem, you'll also lose out on that bonus as well. This is why I love this game. There's just so many cool features. The Magician's Hat that gives you temporary invincibility, and when you're wearing the hat you can take out Bathilda the Witch during this time if she's somewhere in the level. Of course, when you finish the level, you then find that she chases you on a broomstick onto the next level, clearly angry that you've managed to capture her. Now, the witch, Bathilda's the person who trapped you in this crystal castle, and Bentley must make his way through 10 distinct mazes here, each level harder than the last. And this is why, though, I just adore, there's just so many cute touches, and always makes me smile from ear to ear. The collectible honey pots that gives extra points if collected, but have to avoid the bee swarm protecting the honey pot at certain times. Now, thankfully, this game does appear on the Atari Flashback Volume 2 pack on the PS4 and Xbox One, and also there's a fantastic version on the Atari Vault collection on the PC. But it appears in many of the Atari retro packs of previous generations as well. Still, give this game a go, but ideally you do need a trackball if possible, because it's usually a little bit too sensitive on the mouse unless you tweak it exactly to play properly. Now thankfully though, this is another arcade game that is in arcade clubs, so there's no excuse here to not try and give this game a go today. Okay, let's go on to my number 2 choice. Well, I've gone for another Atari classic here, this time with their 1981 brilliant game, Centipede. Now, I have to confess, this is a game that I've only recently come to appreciate to the full extent of this wonderful title. I've just fallen in love with its fast trackball action as you control the Bug Blaster, moving at the bottom of the screen, taking out all the centipede enemies. There's so much strategy to this game, taking out mushrooms to make corridors to shoot the fast falling centipedes, being much more easily as it comes down quickly towards you, being careful not to split the centipede. Alongside all of this, there's fast falling fleas, leaving a trail of mushrooms behind them that ideally must be cleared. These fleas are worth quite a bit of points as well, but they are risky as you have to shoot them twice to kill them as they fall. Likewise, the bouncing of the rather unpredictable spider is another tough one to take out. Now the spider's worth more the closer you are to them when you shoot them, but of course the higher the risk. And finally there's the scorpion, which is worth a whopping 1000 points, but it's well worth trying to take them out. But be careful, because it's easy to die as you take your focus off the other enemies to single out and try to shoot that scorpion down. And this is why I adore this game. It has so much depth and nuance to everything within it. It just has me keep on going back for more and more, always convinced I can do that little bit better next time. Now the game was designed by Donna Bailey and programmed by Ed Logg. Yes, he of Asteroids, Gauntlet and Zybots fame. So you know here you're onto a real winner. Thankfully this is another classic which has found its way onto Atari Flashback Volume 1 and the Atari Vault on the PC. But a bit like with Crystal Castles, ideally you do need a trackball to play this, as it was meant to be originally played. Because again, the modern mouse or analog joystick is just that little too sensitive typically to feel like the original game. Thankfully this is another one that is in Arcade Club, and so it's great to play there. I personally have bought myself a trackball, so I use that to play it at home. Okay, we're coming up to my number one game for the letter C of the arcades. And yes, of course, it had to be Chase HQ, released in 1988 by Taito. Now this game is clearly inspired by Miami Vice and has you play a cop called Tony Gibson, who with his partner Raymond Brody must drive their Porsche at top speed to chase down and smash into the criminals trying to escape, all the while hearing Nancy at headquarters typically telling you how slow and rubbish you are. This game is so much fun, and the concept of bashing into criminals to eventually stop them in their tracks before the timer runs out is a simple masterstroke. Now there's 5 criminals to take on here, each in their own sexy sports cars. Thankfully you have 3 nitros in the tank of your Porsche, and so you can give some mega boosts to first catch up with the enemy and then use them to keep up to take them out. This game has so many great things, such as forks in the road, long tunnels, and it still impresses today, to be honest, being just as much fun as it ever was. And it's a real shame that despite some great home ports on the Spectrum, TurboGrafx is amazing in FM Towns, there's only really the Japanese only Sega Saturn port that gives you the full arcade perfect experience. Still, as you can see, it does play well on MAME, and this is another one that is in the Arcade Club. Yes, overall this is a huge amount of fun and well worth investing a lot of time with to play. Okay, that is my top 5, but my word, there were so many others I could have mentioned here. And here are those few honourable mentions. Okay, big hitters that I haven't included, which may surprise some, is Commando. Now, of course, this is highly regarded, and I really do appreciate how important it is to gaming history. But it's not a game I personally enjoy. I just find it too tough and unforgiving, and I just get frustrated. Another one which I do have a lot of time for is Continental Circus. This Taito classic racer is a lot of fun, but as much as I enjoy it, its over-reliance on having to go into the pit for the slightest collision really lets the game down and frustrates more than it should. Other big hitters such as Atari's Championship Sprint is of course a real classic, but as much as I enjoy it, I do find it's been done much better many times since. Another big hitter is Columns, of course. It's a fondly loved puzzle game, although I'll be honest, it's not one of my favourites of the puzzle genre. Then there's Choplifter. Now this was another one that is fondly loved with many great home ports, and it's one I enjoy as well, but probably not one of my favourites, hence why it didn't make the list. The final one for the big hitters is Cruisin' USA, or any of the Cruisin' series, to be honest. There was also Cruisin' World and Cruisin' Exotica. Now I love these madcap arcade racers by Eugene Jarvis. Yes, him of Defender and Robotron 2084 fame, but I appreciate the toy arcade-like racing involved with this isn't to everyone's taste, and I do know it does frustrate some. For me, as much as I love these games, I just couldn't with good conscience put it on the list when you have titles like Chase HQ and Crazy Taxi, which are, to be honest, so much better. Along with those big hitters that people always think of, there's a lot of lesser known titles in the letter C which are definitely worth mentioning here and worthy of your time. Now there's Cannon Spike by Capcom. Now this is a great overhead 3D shooter that lets you play actual Capcom stars from other games and take out enemies. Overall, this is a total love letter to Capcom, and it has a great Dreamcast port, so well worth trying to track down and play if you can. Then there's Carrier Airwing. This 1990 game by Capcom I do completely adore, and to be honest, for the longest time it was on my list because I love this horizontal shooter. In the end though, I decided Crazy Taxi just pipped it to the post when playing it through because I just found myself playing Crazy Taxi so much more. Other ones is Caveman Ninja, Joe and Mac. It's a fun platformer. I know it's fondly loved by some. I do find it a little bit clunky. Perhaps a better mention is Chelnov Atomic Runner. Now this is a really fun platformer where you're constantly moving, and it's definitely deserving of some love because I never hear it getting mentioned. Another hidden gem is Cobra Command. No, I'm not talking about the 1984 Laserdisc version by Data East. I'm talking about the 1988 Data East game. Now this got pretty average reviews back in the day for the arcade, but I actually have a real soft spot for it. I love the big bold sprites and find this simple horizontal shooter so much fun that I think it deserves a try by more. Then there's Sega's Confidential Mission, a great light gun shooter, taking all that was great about Virtua Cop, but setting it in a James Bond spy scenario with every trope wheeled out across all the levels. It's so much fun. And finally, there's some other great shooters as well. Cotton, of course, is a brilliant horizontal shooter with you being a witch on a broom, and it's just so much fun. But perhaps Cotton Boomerang is probably the one to go for. This is the revised version of Cotton 2 with some tweaks here and there, and it's such a beautiful looking shooter and a huge amount of non-stop fueled adrenaline action coming against some brilliant enemies and bosses, all beautifully hand drawn. So there you go, there are my favourite arcade games for the letter C, and it's testament that there were so many additional fun games that I played through that I could have easily added here, but obviously I didn't want to go through too many honourable mentions. So let me know in the comments what your favourite games are for the letter C in the arcade, as I really would love to hear. Okay, so look out for my next video where we look at the letter D, and I for one can't wait chewing through some of those games. In the meantime, just to note, I'm also on the RGDS podcast as one of the hosts, where we go into a lot of depth on many of these games, actually far more than I would do on a video here. So until next time, keep it retro.